New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Thanks for
we will figure out this technology sooner or later. Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. Oh my gosh. Have you ever heard people talk like they're doing a talk, right? And they'll be like, on my way to get here today. And then they tell you all the things that happened on their way. I'm going to spare you the story about all the things that have happened on my way to get here today. And if you are watching live, I want to thank you for giving me a little bit of grace because we are starting a little bit later than our normal time of noon Mountain Time right here on the New Thought Media Network. And you can probably guess I'm not in my regular background, my regular location. We got this funky thing happening and I don't like it. So I am going to change the background to just blur the fact that I am in a bed and breakfast somewhere on the road, because I really want to talk about this show today. I really want to talk about this idea of what are some of the common criticisms that people have when leaders in their churches decide to focus on inclusion. Now, what's true is that we already know, and we've talked about a few times, the idea of that has come up a number of times with people in New Thought spiritual communities saying, we don't need to talk about diversity because we believe in oneness, and diversity is division, which of course is not what we teach and is not a true understanding of oneness or wholeness or love or unity or harmony or any of those primary spiritual or foundational spiritual principles. But today we're going to talk about what comes up in more traditional Christian environments that people say, are reasons why we shouldn't be talking about inclusion or focusing on inclusion. And when I looked at this list, I was able to make some surprising parallels to New Thought denominations and considerations. So today I don't have a guest. It is a Toolkit Tuesday. I'm just going to spend about 20 minutes sharing the list with you and making some general comments. But mainly what I want you to do is I want you to then think about some of these comments, some of these criticisms, and really consider how might people in your church or your spiritual community be saying or thinking these kinds of things, and what would your response be if they were talking to you or if you were in a meeting where some of these ideas came forward. So the first one, well, I'm just going to read this introduction. Criticism of inclusive churches often center on concerns about compromising traditional doctrines, watering down the gospel message, and I'll just say watering down the message, and potential theological inconsistencies. Some critics argue that an emphasis on inclusivity might lead to a neglect of addressing sin and promoting personal growth, while others express skepticism about the sincerity of inclusive language and practices, particularly regarding LGBTQ plus inclusion. So let's look at I think there's 6 of them, of the criticisms. The first one is compromising doctrine and the gospel. So let's translate that into New Thought speak. Compromising doctrine, compromising purpose, compromising our foundational truths or our foundational principles. And under that, they have, diluting the message and also theological inconsistencies, rejection of biblical authority. Now, I found this so interesting because even in 2025, I have heard people in New Thought communities basically say the same thing in religious science. People saying, but that is not what Ernest Holmes taught, right? Or that is not what we teach about oneness. The example that I started with, we believe in oneness, so why are we talking about inclusion, or why are we talking about diversity? And it's like we're going to go back to how I understand the theology, whether I understand it well or not, but based on my understanding, like this is out of alignment with our basic doctrine, our basic theology. And so, I have a whole catalog full of responses when this kind of thing comes up in conversations I'm in. But my main purpose today is to encourage you to think about, what are you going to say when people say, oh, this is not in alignment with unity teachings? Oh, this is not in alignment with science of mind, basic teachings about, blah, blah, blah. Whichever basic science of mind teaching they're quoting. And so are you prepared to either explain that basic principle from a different perspective, or to counter with additional perspectives? Because that's what it takes in real time, not to make it an argument, not to make it a debate, but to truly say, well, yes, but we also believe this, or yes, well, my understanding of that is this, and then explaining it from a different perspective. So that's number one on the list, that in traditional Christian communities, it comes up a lot. Number two, neglecting sin and personal transformation. Now, in New Thought communities, we don't teach sin as anything more than I've made a mistake, but it is not a character. It is not a now I am punished for life. Now I'm going to hell. It is a sin is a mistake. I missed the mark. I missed the goal or the intention, or I made a choice and these were the consequences. And now I can make a new choice. So in the traditional Christian environment, that connection between sin and personal transformation is that if you are paying attention to inclusion, you're avoiding accountability, and you're focusing on feelings more so than truth. And that's actually almost the exact opposite. Like when we are paying attention to inclusion, we are taking on more accountability to be examples of love, unity, and harmony in the world, in the physical form, in the human experience. And often when people are saying that inclusion means you're going to avoid or release the responsibility to be accountable, or that you're focusing on feelings, they're assuming that the conversation about diversity or the conversation about inclusion is about fixing something, or especially fixing people who feel bad about themselves. And most of our work that is related to inclusion in our churches is not about that. It actually is about holding our members, our leaders, accountable for love thy neighbor as thyself. It is about holding ourselves accountable to a global vision in religious science, a global vision of creating a world that works for everyone. It is about, in unity principles, it is about connecting with the principles that drive the behavior, or the powers of the 12 powers that make us know the importance of love, how we treat people, and how we show up. And so, are you prepared? Are you prepared when someone says to you, oh, you're just wanting us to be inclusive so it can feel good, right? Or so people can feel good, or we can make the world better for other people, and we're getting away from the point of our teaching, right? Which, if someone said that to me, I'd be a little confused, except that I've actually heard that in not just once, not just twice, but a few dozen times. Okay, what's the third example? The headline is Skepticism about Sincerity and Authenticity. And I love this. And I think in our New Thought communities, we have to be really careful about this. So an individual church decides to really hold itself accountable for being inclusive, and it publicizes it, and it features images of people from different age groups, different racial or ethnic identity groups, different sexual orientation and gender identity groups, just diversity in a lot of ways. But if I come to your community, I might be a little skeptical, like, wait a minute, I hear the language and I see these images, but then when I look on the platform at the weekly service, I see everybody of the same race and sometimes the same gender. And I'm not so sure, is this just lip service? Or there are one or two or very few people who are different from the visual norm, at least. And then I get asked to be on a committee. Well, everybody who comes maybe is asked to be on a committee, but if I'm in a group that I don't see a lot of people, it's like, oh, do you want me to be a token? Or are you really asking me because of my skills, my background? And so you want to be sure to be able to have that conversation, because some of the people you are most trying to attract are going to be skeptical. They are going to be cautious about being a quote unquote token who is just put in a position for show or for image. They're going to be skeptical about whether or not that additional visibility is actually dangerous for them. I'm thinking of a community about 2 years ago. I participated on a panel with a few other people. And when the conversation turned to how can we be welcoming, affirming, and truly engage our transgender members or the transgender community in an authentic, warm, welcoming way. And in that conversation on that panel, one of the things we talked about was, um, being, if someone is transgender, asking them to be visible in that way may not be comfortable for them, that they may fear being judged in a community that hasn't already done some work around this or had some previous experience. And the conversation was so rich because there were people who were like, oh, I never thought about that. I thought they would be proud to, be in the spotlight. And that phrase, in the spotlight, gave us a place to talk about spotlights work two ways, right? You can be in the spotlight and it can be very healthy and it can be very encouraging, or you can be in the spotlight and it can be harmful. It could actually be physically dangerous depending on the situation. And so you want to be able to address the skepticism that someone might have, especially if they are a member of a group that's been marginalized or any group that is not um, already fully integrated into your church's activities. And I say that to remind me and almost every church I have been in conversation with in the last 5 years has, in addition to being concerned about people um, who are not coming back, like wanting to bring more people back post COVID pandemic, equally often the conversation is about how do we get younger adults involved and engaged. Well, if I'm a young adult in my late 20s or early 30s and I come into your community and everybody on the platform is in their 60s or 70s, or everybody I see in a leadership role is, in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. As someone who is in my late 20s or early 30s, I'm going to be skeptical. Like, you're telling me you want me to be involved. And at the same time, I don't see other people anywhere near my age. I see my parents and my grandparents, and I'm just not sure, right? And so, how do you build that trust and that authentic relationship? Because that is a very important group. And so that's going to be true whether the um, whether it's age or whether it's gender identity or whether it's race or ethnicity. You just want to be aware that there are going to be people who are skeptical, not because of doctrine, not because of principle, but because they are hesitant to be in the spotlight in a negative way. In this summary that I read about criticisms of the focus of inclusion, yes, it did focus on Christian communities, but every one of them I found parallels in our New Thought, contemporary New Thought spiritual communities. And so the next one that was highlighted was the criticism about getting involved in broader societal concerns. The idea that being inclusive means you have to talk about the impact of slavery in the US, or that you have to talk about the impact of how people who are transgender are treated in society as a whole, in order to create an environment in your church where people who are transgender can be welcomed effectively. And so, reading from the summary, critics argue that inclusive churches may be overly influenced by secular culture, prioritizing social acceptance over adherence to the religious values. And so it's really up to us to talk about what may be happening in the world with the context of our spiritual principles, our spiritual values. It's our responsibility to do that. Otherwise, how could we expect, or why would we expect, that someone would just automatically build that bridge? Because the only place they hear people talking about these things are in the political world or in the secular world, usually from a political polarity perspective. So it's up to us to build that bridge. And it's up to us to build the bridge between our spiritual values and principles, and how we are taking that into the world of effect, the world of what is happening in politics, the world of what is happening with immigration, the world or the conversation about what is happening with people who are transgender being killed or experiencing physical violence. It's up to us to bring forward our spiritual understanding and principles and values to the conversation about the disproportionate number of Black men and women who are killed when they are unarmed. It's very, very important. And again, I shouldn't be surprised, but I was surprised that point by point of what the criticisms of inclusion are in the traditional Christian world overlap so much with what I have heard as hesitancies, concerns, or plain out disagreement with a focus on inclusion. Number 5 really spoke to and focused on the LGBTQ plus community and inclusion of people who identify as LGBTQ plus. And again, in New Thought, we often, yeah, I'm going to say pretend. Had to think about, is that the word I want to use? We often pretend because there are so many ministers, there are so many members, there are so many practitioners, chaplains, licensed teachers. There are many people in the New Thought movement who are out, who are visible, and And still we have churches and communities that, well, we're okay and comfortable with people who identify as lesbian and gay, but I'm not so sure about transgender, right? Or, well, we don't need to talk about this because in our community, everybody is welcome. But so we're not going to talk about what's going on in the world. And if someone comes to our community and they are impacted by what's going on in the world, oh no, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to tell them, you know, God loves them and so do we, and you're safe and loved here, but not engage with what the experience is that they must deal with as they go into the world. So these are the things that really, these criticisms, the summary is, these criticisms highlight the complex and multifaceted nature of the inclusive church movement, raising important questions about the balance between love, truth, and tradition within churches. Now, I do like that summary. However, I do not agree with the idea or the phrase of the inclusive church movement. And that may be a whole nother show. Is it a movement or is it simply living our spiritual principles and values? Is it a temporary movement that is like kind of join in, like be a part of the vanguard? Or is it join in and be the example of our values and principles? Or is it, instead of a movement, is it a call to live our values that have already existed and have existed for centuries? So I don't know if what I think the answer to that is, I'm loving that it's getting me to ask questions. And I want to encourage you to ask yourself many of these same questions, because the real deal is, how do we show up day in, day out, week in, week out, for the people who are already in our communities and for the people who visit our communities who we would like to make members. My name is Tracy Brown. That's the Tuesday toolkit for Inclusive Church this week. And I hope that you will join me again next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, right here on the New Thought Media Network.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.